Hi, I'm Connor. Here's Tao and Leo. We're going to talk about the Cold War.
First of all, the US ended the Second World War by dropping the little boy on Japan. The Manhattan Project were kept away from the Soviets.
So all of a sudden, the Soviets heard about the city being destroyed with a single bomb that the United States built. This dramatically increased the tension between the US and the USSR.
Indeed, 4 years later, at 1949, the Soviets detonated their first atomic bomb, marking the end in US extreme nuclear authority.
The US felt that they need to be head of the USSR, so they detonated their very first hydrogen bomb at the year 1952. The destructive power increased so much that it feared the Soviets.
The US is in the lead while Eisenhower proposed the idea of massive retaliation, which basically says build more nuclear bombs so we could outnumber them.
Yes, but at the end of his presidency, he gave a speech about the military power that he built, and he was feared that this power would be disguised by other aggressive leaders that would be taking over.
The Russians decided that they would not lose the race, so they went on in a different category that really shocked the US.
The US took the lead in arms race from the atomic bomb at the massive retaliation. Now the Soviets caught up.
They launched the very first ICBM that deeply threatened the US because they know the fact that the Soviets could launch the missile ability to launch a missile at the US anytime and anywhere they want.
And 2 months later, the highest tension all of Cold War so far, shocked scientists, analysts, Americans, and other people that Soviet Union actually took lead in the space race.
Launch of their very first artificial satellite caught the Sputnik into space and into orbit.
The US wasn't just afraid, they are shocked. They expect, and the scientists didn't expect this coming. They all thought the US was taking the lead in technological advance, and the US would come up with its newer technology faster than the USSR.
Instead, the Russians launched an artificial satellite into space. This raises the tension to the highest in history, because not only is it intercontinental, the US could be threatened by attack from space. The US won't even realize that Sputnik is above them.
The US responded and built their very own Explorer 1 the following year and concentrate their own effort and finances in the space race.
Due to the combination of arms and space race, there's a possibility considered by two countries that they'll be combining nuclear weapon and orbital satellite to start an orbital nuclear war.
Later on, the US experienced the closest to erupting a nuclear war. It's referred as the Cuban Missile Crisis. People often hear this phrase and only knowing the story one-sided.
Indeed, during 1959, US first deployed missiles in Turkey, facing directly at Russia.
As we know, this is a very aggressive move and is very close to triggering a war. This is by far the highest tension in the history of Cold War.
Then, in return, the Russians then placed missiles in Cuba, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. So actually, the Cuban Missile Crisis is a comeback from the Russians. Cold War lasted for 45 years. And during this 45 years, approximately 5 million people died. It's a tragic, yeah. And I personally think that in any case, violence is not the way to solve any problem. And with more weapons, you lead to more problems. And I hope you learned something today. Enjoy your day. Thank you.